I started Who's Jack in 2006. I registered it not really knowing what registering a company actually meant. I've been doing magazines sort of with Prickstick and with photocopiers and things like that for a few months and events, and I knew that I wanted to make something more of it. My day job wasn't really doing it for me, and I enjoyed doing my Jack stuff a lot more. So I registered the company, started learning a lot about companies and companies' house and things like that. It's really important when you decide to register something properly to really learn about what that means, because you have a lot of responsibilities as director or even as a company secretary, that company's house, if you tell them you didn't know you were meant to be doing X, Y, and Z, then they don't really care. So that is something that I learned pretty quickly. I started Jack because there was myself and a lot of my friends who really wanted to do something creative and that we enjoyed, but there wasn't really an outlet, to do that. It was hard to get into creative companies at the time. There wasn't really, Facebook was just starting, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't, Tumblr wasn't kind of rife. There was only really MySpace, which we were sort of on and, using, but it wasn't really the same as what's kind of out there now. We also wanted, something for all of us. We wanted to create something that everyone could do something in, whether they were into photography, whether they were into styling, writing, etc. So we started doing events, but then we decided to do a publication because it sort of encompassed everything, really. When you're, building something from the ground, you really have to force yourself to do some things that you're not particularly comfortable with, because you are having to take on a lot of roles yourself. In the beginning, when we started, I wouldn't even really like phoning people up. For some reason, I kind of felt like a bit of an imposter in this world of media. I was like, we've just decided to do a magazine. Will you help us? Will you do something with us? And I was convinced they wouldn't take us seriously. But I had to sort of force myself to almost lie to myself and be like, we're completely serious. But, it wasn't really lying to myself, but it was lying to what I was thinking. And it was fine. The more confident you are with what you're doing, it shows through. So I would say always, the worst people can say is no. It's always worth asking. It's always worth trying when you're, building a brand, building a company. So many of our writers started and stayed for a long time. Some people just wrote one piece and went away. Some people just came in off and on to do makeup or styling or whatever it was.
Hi, my name's Faye. I'm a long-standing contributor to Who's Jack. I've been with the magazine since before it even started. I met Lou in Camden, and she told me about this idea she had. I got involved, and I ended up being the features editor of the magazine. So delivering a lot of editorial, getting contributors on board, interviewing all sorts of interesting people. I still contribute to Who's Jack these days. I'm the Fashion Week editor, so I'm on the ground at Fashion Week every season, and I actually put my first ever fashion shoot into Who's Jack. I now work as a fashion stylist and a creative director. I've got my work published in lots of different publications, but Who's Jack essentially was the first place I got published. And in fact, I went to the editor Louise and said, I want to shoot a fashion editorial, and she said, go ahead. This is an image from my first ever fashion shoot on the back cover of Who's Jack. This is one of my second or third fashion shoots on the front cover of Who's Jack. So as you can see, Who's Jack's been absolutely crucial in my development as a creative.
When I first met the Who's Jack team, I was partying in a club in West London. It was a crazy Christmas party they threw in Westbourne Grove. I got really drunk. They filmed me on camera saying some stupid things, and basically blackmailed me into writing for them. That's not true. They asked me if I'd come to one of their first writers' meetings. I went down and met this crazy eclectic bunch of people, from Landonian aristocracy to awesome northern scallies and weird people from the Midlands like myself. And I started writing some features for them, and some very personal articles as well, which I hope never see the light of day again. We did some really fun things. We went out, we interviewed bands, we put on events. The events were amazing, and I got to meet an amazing bunch of people. Through that, I managed to make really good contacts. I think I have most of the owners of the nightclubs in London in my black book, which is really useful at times. And I've been out blagging at festivals and all that kind of thing. So that's awesome. I think the excitement of being with something that we knew was going to be big at the time was my main attraction with Who's Jack. It was such an exciting project to be involved in. I also gained lots of confidence from going to these events. Turning up at these events and having to speak to celebrities or random PRs is brilliant, and it really it helps you bring you out of yourself. And I'd only been in London recently, so that was a big boon for me, and it's really helped me throughout my career since.
So I first met Lou at Who's Jack in early 2007 after she put an advert in Gorkana. I wanted to learn more about this magazine. It sounded fascinating. It was all about East London, style, fashion, culture, all those things that I was interested in, but perhaps not cool enough to know much about. I went along to my first meeting. I met these the friendliest people like Adam and Faye, Stu, and obviously Louise herself. And we got on like a house on fire. I liked the fact that she had a magazine like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was not bound by the strict and boring rules of normal journalism.
You do have to be careful. And another thing I'd say is don't go to the angel investors meetings that they make you pay for. They really persuade you that it's going to happen and you're going to get something out of it. And I have never ever heard of anyone getting anything out of it, and I'm just convinced they're just a con. So just be careful of things like that, because they sound so good and they can just persuade you of so many things. But I don't know, I think the best way is networking, going to people directly, really do your research on people. Find out if they've got a load of money, find out if they're still working, or maybe they've decided that they're getting involved in charitable causes and they're really into philanthropy, things like that. Really look in your business newspapers and stuff. Find someone that you think really has a common affiliation with what you're doing, and just approach them directly. Know what you want it for, have a really good business plan, and go for it, because then that'll all help. But yeah, in the meantime, it was the only way that I could have done it. I did take a couple of part-time jobs, I did some temping for a while so that I could spend more time on Jack, and have the money to do it. But yeah. We tried to do what a lot of the other free publications weren't doing, because we did start off in a time where, Vice was big. We had Stool Pigeon that was very concentrated on music, just starting out at the same time as us, more of a newspaper sort of publication. The Fly, that was just music, and a number of others. So we tried to do as many things that would sort of keep us different from them, really. We also tried to keep our constraints pretty low. We worked very tight deadlines to keep things as relevant as possible. We also had, we didn't have an office at the time, so we had regular meetings with all our writers and all our contributors. And, no matter who they were, even if they'd just emailed us and said they'd really like to get involved and they'd come down to the meeting that day, we'd let them pitch ideas. And if they had any good ideas, then we'd get them to run with it and we'd see what they came back with. And if it was great, we'd put it in. There was no sort of snobbery around what have you done before, have you, proved yourself already, and things like that. We very much saw Jack as a platform for people to prove themselves.
In
terms of actual day-to-day PR techniques, journalists nowadays don't really appreciate the constant hounding on the phone. They don't have the time, they get annoyed, you'll just get a reputation for being a bit of an aggravation. So always tailor your emails to the editor specifically of who you need to talk to, the section that you need to talk to. Don't just blanket email to the news editor. Call up fair enough and say who is looking after your diary section, for example. Get the targeted email. Always message the person directly by their name who's looking after that section, and tailor your email to why it would fit there. Why would your business fit in that particular section? Show some knowledge of the readership of that demographic. What journalists are looking for now is really, really intelligent PR, really knowing who you're talking to and why it would be of interest, why this news story is of interest to that magazine. I think from a PR angle, quite early on, you probably need to ascertain what your mission statement is, what sets you apart from other businesses that are currently in existence. What differentiates you, what is your key message, what is your unique selling point. So clarify that quite early on and make sure that message is kept consistent throughout the year with any communication that you go out with. So I guess what sets Who's Jack London apart from other companies in London is I don't think there are other companies that do what Who's Jack do. In the beginning it was music. It evolved to really a magazine with really high quality editorial. The fact that you get journalists, writers from all over, journalists that were professional journalists being paid to do it, but also up and coming journalists, up and coming students, and generally people that just had a bit of an opinion, a bit of a viewpoint on certain things. The fact that it was free, there's no tacky advertising. It was all real sort of genuine, authentic stuff that Who's Jack was going out with, and that's why it's kept going for so long. I also think it's important that Who's Jack has evolved with the current media sort of marketplace.